In the far north of Russia, there exists a mystery that appears all over the world but is still not completely understood. Over a dozen structures hidden on a remote island, heaps of bones scattered across the landscape, and pathways that connect the world of the living to the world of the dead. In this episode, I'm gonna take you through an ancient mystery that challenges the way we think about ancient rituals, death, and the people who've come before us. You won't want to miss this one. On a cold morning on a remote northern island, a researcher named Vlad Abramov set out on a walk he would never forget. It began at what seemed to be just a simple pile of stones. And to the untrained eye, it probably looked like any other boulder field you'd find appear at the top of the world. But Vlad knew that these weren't arranged randomly. They formed a spiritual pattern on the ground. He was standing at the entrance to one of the world's oldest and most mysterious structures, a stone labyrinth that has remained practically unchanged for 5,000 years. So he took a deep breath and he took a step between the rows. The path was only about a foot wide and the stones weren't that big either. They were mostly around knee height, just above the ground. But even though he could see across the entire labyrinth, he noticed something. As he began following the path through all its twists and turns, he lost all sense of how far he had actually walked. And the path twisted clockwise and then counterclockwise, doubling back on itself again and again. Not only that, but he noticed that he had started losing track of how long he had been walking. And in his mind, he knew that it had to have only been a few minutes. But tracing those contours back and forth, he could have easily been convinced that it was taking a lot longer. He would later report that this feeling was completely disorienting. And he said that just a few turns in, you really lose all sense of time and direction. And not only that, but every time he tried to look up, the sensation increased. He said that the only way to get through the maze was to basically stare at your feet the entire time. Now, in the end, he said it only took him a quarter of an hour to navigate the entire thing. But when you're in there, it feels like forever, like time itself stops whenever you walk through it. Now, because of all of this, Vlad said he felt an overwhelming sense of relief when he reached the end and stepped out. Although it was hard to put his finger on it, he said that he felt somehow changed by the experience, that the man who went in was not the same who came out on the other side. What Vlad Abramov had just walked through wasn't some tacky tourist trap, and it wasn't a modern construction. It was one of the many mysterious stone labyrinths found on Bolshoi Zayatsky Island, which is part of Russia's Zayatsky archipelago. And to really appreciate just how odd these structures are, we need to look back at the remote location where they're found. Look, I'll be honest, I want to eat better at home, but like you, I hate meal planning and I really hate grocery shopping. Half the time, I'd end up ordering takeout just because it's easier. That's honestly why HelloFresh stuck for me, because it solved both problems without making cooking feel like such a chore. Now, what I love about HelloFresh is that it brings back the part of cooking I enjoy, making real food without all the stress. These recipes take about 30 minutes or less, and I love that everything I need just shows up at my door, and I'm not trying to wander to the grocery store, trying to remember if I forgot something. What's really cool is they've made a lot of improvements. There are 100 plus recipes to choose from every week, including 15 plus high protein options, which has made it way easier to stay consistent or feeling like my meals are horrifically imbalanced. And there's tons of flexibility. You're not locked in. I can skip weeks. I can swap meals. I could pause anytime I want. There's no pressure. And when I actually added up what I was spending on takeout and extra grocery runs, well, HelloFresh ended up saving me money, and I'm eating way better than I was before. If you want to give it a shot, you could use my code LurksFM at HelloFresh.com for 10 free meals plus free shipping. Sign up today, click the link below, or use my code LurksFM at HelloFresh.com. The Zayatsky Islands are about as isolated as you can get. They're a group of 6 islands located in the frigid White Sea, which is a body of water to the east of Finland. And because of their conditions and how hard they are to reach, less than 1,000 people inhabit this island chain today. But this wasn't always the case, because at one point, the Zayatsky Islands were very wealthy and influential, because in the 1400s, it's been home to a major monastery complex belonging to the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, over time, though the population dwindled to where it is today, now people live near the old monastery. And as impressive as the monastery is, it isn't the most fascinating feature. It's the ancient structures that were built thousands of years before any of the monks arrived. Bolshoi Zayatsky Island, where Vlad was conducting research, is tiny. I mean, it covers less than 1 square mile, but even despite its size, it contains something very extraordinary: over a dozen ancient stone labyrinths, all concentrated on the western side of the island in an area just 1/6 of a square mile. In total, it's about 35 of these little labyrinths, making it one of the densest collections of structures in the entire world. Now, the people living on the island have a special name for them. They call them Vavilons, which translates into English as Babylons. This word provides a crucial clue for some researchers because they believe it may connect the stone labyrinths to the legendary Tower of Babel. Now, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the biblical account of human beings that once spoke a single language and began building a great tower to reach the heavens. And, God, as told in the book of Genesis, disrupted the project by confusing their language, scattering people all across the earth and giving rise to many tongues and nations. We all know that. But unlike the infamous Tower of Babel, the labyrinths on this island aren't tall. And in fact, they're remarkably low to the ground. And that's part of what makes them so unique. I mean, when you're too far away, you can't see them, you have to know where they are, and you could only appreciate the complexity when you look at them from above. Now, both of these factors raise one key question. Why would the people who built these things create a pattern that they themselves could never fully see? Because each labyrinth varies in size. I mean, the smallest is only around 20 feet across. The bigger ones can reach over 80 feet in diameter, and each one has been constructed from boulders collected locally and simply just placed on the ground. And there really isn't any evidence of mortar holding them together or anything like that. They're just all arranged in a circular pattern that has somehow survived thousands of years despite being set on the ground. The rows of boulders form intricate spirals, with some consisting of 2 coils that wind together. I mean, some have said that these double spiral designs look like a pair of serpents with their heads meeting in the middle, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Each labyrinth has only one entrance point and one exit point. These are usually located on the structure's southern side, but honestly, that's where all similarities end, because even though they share a lot of features in common, no 2 labyrinths are exactly identical. Now, over years of study, archaeologists have identified 5 different setting types, and the labyrinths come in various designs: 1 helix, 2 helix, concentric, and crosswise. Another thing making each labyrinth unique is that along some of the sections of the spirals, we find these heaps of stones that are wider. The ends of the spirals are widened too, and there are also spots along the spiral pathways where the stones are piled higher than the others. Now, the significance of these changes is anybody's guess. I mean, some assume that the builders wanted to emphasize certain parts of the path, but nobody really knows why. Now, the plot thickens because this little island doesn't just contain these labyrinths. Scattered all across the island are 850 stone mounds, heaps of boulders that archaeologists have studied extensively. And what they found inside of these is deeply unsettling. Many of these stone piles contain fragments of human bones, which suggests that all the structures have some sort of deep, important ritual connection. I mean, it looks like the labyrinths and the mounds are somehow related to death and burial traditions once practiced by whoever lived there before monks ever arrived. So far, we've got the labyrinths and the stone mounds, but on the eastern part of the island, there's a whole other set of stone formations that aren't labyrinths. And in some way, these are even more mysterious because their exact purpose is entirely unknown. For example, we know that people were meant to walk through labyrinths, and we know that the mounds were used for burials. But the designs on the eastern side include what appears to be a representation of the sun, with spokes coming out of it like rays of light. I mean, it's like art or another ritual space. Now, the burning question behind all of this is who built it and why? Radiocarbon analysis shows that there has been a human presence on the islands dating back to the 6th or 7th millennium BC, which is as far back as 7,000 years. The labyrinths, though, are younger. From what we can tell, it's believed that they date to around 3000 BC. And recently, back in 2006, a group of researchers suggested that they might be a little newer, around 2,500 years old. But that's still ancient and way earlier than when any of the monks arrived. I mean, that's 500 years before Christ was even alive. So who are the people who built the labyrinths? It's all guesswork, folks. I mean, we do know that nomadic Sami tribes lived on the island in the 1st millennium BC, but from everything we can tell, the labyrinths would have already been there when they arrived, right? The most that archaeologists can say with certainty is that they were constructed by a prehistoric people. They appeared on the islands, then vanished, and they left behind these structures, but no written record explaining who or why they were created. Now, as impressive as the labyrinths here are, they aren't that unique from a global perspective of history. Ready for this? Now, the same labyrinth patterns we see on the island appeared everywhere at the same time. Cultures that are not supposed to have had any contact between each other all miraculously came up with the same designs that are on the same period in history? How do we explain that? More than 300 ancient labyrinth monuments have been found around the world, with countless others probably lost to time. I mean, they have been discovered on every inhabited continent, from Neolithic rock carvings and stone formations in Europe to similar designs in Native American culture. I mean, look at the prehistoric petroglyphs in Goa, India. It all shows the same pattern. Cave art in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent and a dolmen shrine in the Nilgiri Mountains. And one of the earliest known artistic depictions of the 7th Circuit Labyrinth symbol appears on a clay tablet dating back to 1200 BC. Later, in medieval Christian tradition, labyrinths served as symbols of cleansing from sins. Some European cathedrals have labyrinth patterns on their floors so that pilgrims can follow their knees as a form of penance. But if you look to the origins of the labyrinth as a symbol, it's kind of weird. It would be an amazing coincidence, wouldn't it, that everyone came up with this design at around the same time all across the earth. This has led many people to believe that archaeological structures like the Bolshoi Zayatsky labyrinths point to a long-lost ancient civilization that spanned the entire planet. I mean, how else do you explain this symbol showing up everywhere? Some suggest that because all these symbols showed up at the same time, that it might point to refugees fleeing a collapsing ancient civilization. And honestly, it starts to sound a lot like the story of the lost continent of Atlantis, doesn't it? A city sinking into the sea, its survivors scattering across the world, carrying fragments of their shared culture to their new homes? I don't know. But of course, like all of us, we're all just talking. We don't really know anything. We can just speculate. And I say this to everybody who I have conversations with. This is all very interesting, and I'm sure many of you keyboard warriors are gonna be like, well, actually, it's blah, blah, blah. But listen, we don't know nothing. And if we do, it's very little. None of us were around then. We're all just speculating. We don't know the exact purpose of the labyrinths, and even archaeologists haven't even reached an agreement. So if they're the experts, then why can't they agree? I mean, they still debate why they were built. And over the years, there have been multiple theories that have been proposed. Some practical and some spiritual, and obviously some more supernatural. Now, one of the most intriguing theories suggests that this labyrinth symbolized a border between this world and the underworld. And according to this line of thought, they were used for very specific rituals that helped the souls of the dead travel to the afterlife. The bone fragments found in the stone mounds across the island do lend credibility to this theory. And to fully appreciate the possibility, we have to really think about the cultural context. Various groups from the Northern Hemisphere believed in the idea of three worlds, which is a cosmic structure that organized all of existence. The lower world was where souls went after death, a realm beneath the earth that could only be accessed through specific portals of passages. You had the middle world, which consisted of the physical plane of existence where humans lived their daily lives. And then you have the upper world, which is the stars, clouds, the gods, the celestial realm above us, visible in the sky. And so, the labyrinths might have represented the journey between them, or perhaps served as a map of the lower world that souls would need to navigate after death. So maybe in this context, walking through it would have been a symbolic rehearsal for the journey your soul would take when you died. But others don't think that the labyrinths were used for the human dead, though. They think the labyrinths were actually designed as traps for evil spirits. Now, in many ancient cultures, spirits were thought to travel in straight lines. So the twisting, turning labyrinth might confuse them or entrap them, keeping them from harming the living. It's the same principle that you see in dream catchers. In fact, in the 1930s, researcher Pavel Florensky built off this same idea. He suggested that the labyrinths were essentially tombstones designed to prevent the souls of the dead from returning to the world of the living. The same idea applied. The confusing path would trap spirits within the labyrinth, preventing them from ever finding their way back to haunt the living. However, archaeological excavations later rejected this tombstone theory. And as it turns out, there weren't enough human remains associated directly with the labyrinths to support the presence of any burials underneath. So far, we've got the idea that the labyrinths were built either for the human dead or for trapping evil spirits. Bear with me here. What if neither of these is correct? In fact, what if they were used by the living? Some think that they were used for sacred tribal practices. In fact, Professor Alexander Kuratov described the labyrinths as spiral-shaped figures that could have been an important part of initiation ceremonies or rites of passage, where the journey through the labyrinth represented a symbolic death and rebirth. Now, in a related line of thought, there is the possibility that the labyrinths were part of an elaborate shamanic ritual, that maybe they helped the community's spiritual figures with their dances and served as altars for their ceremonies, or represented portals to the underworld. According to an archaeologist named A.L. Nikitin, the labyrinths might point to entrances and exits to a hidden realm, another world that can only be opened by shamans who know how to access them. Now, this may seem pretty far out in left field, but a lot of people acknowledge that the labyrinths probably had some sort of mystical purpose. Some of them learned this firsthand because remember how Vlad Abramov felt when he walked through one of them. Tracing the path through a labyrinth is believed to bring some sort of altered state of consciousness. Now, this isn't all nonsensical either, because even today, people who visit these labyrinths still report this subjective feeling that time stops while walking the path. It's just another clue supporting the possibility that these structures might have been designed to alter perception or create specific mental states. Labyrinths also represent another kind of journey, a journey within ourselves. I was gonna say a journey within a journey, like Inception, but I digress. Now, think of this as a physical path that mirrors an internal one. Alexander Ilasiv, who documented the labyrinths in 1883, wrote that their form has symbolic meaning or mythical lining. Let's rewind just for a second. Do you remember how we talked about that the labyrinths look almost like snakes? Well, he suggested that they might symbolize both the infinity of the world and the serpent. And so the fact that spiral patterns are so universal suggests they tap into something fundamental in human psychology or our spiritual understanding. Some researchers, though, have proposed much more practical purposes for these strange structures. In the 1970s, archaeologists suggested that the labyrinths weren't all that mysterious. They said that these were most likely built to be traps for fish. And the idea is actually somewhat plausible. While they are on dry land, today, water levels are higher than they were 5,000 years ago. So maybe these parts of the island were actually just shallow shoals. Another thing to consider is that similar labyrinths found throughout Russia are located near water too, usually on islands or river estuaries. The idea is that whoever built them would wait until high tide, and then maybe with a bit of bait placed in the center, the fish would swim through all the twists and turns until they reached the middle. And when low tide came, the fish would be trapped inside, and all the people had to do was just go up and grab them and have dinner. I mean, it seems like a pretty reasonable thought when it's all laid out like that, but as convincing as it is, it does have some holes because people have pointed out that some of the labyrinths are just way too far inland to have served as fish traps, even if you take into account higher sea levels. But their retort is that, they were just created higher up on land to serve as models or examples of how to do it. So, that way the younger generation would learn. But honestly, we'll never know. I mean, the whole thing sounds pretty fishy to me. But look, jokes aside, even if the labyrinths weren't made for catching food, they still might have had a practical use. And that could have actually had a spiritual significance. A man by the name of L. Urshov theorized that the labyrinths actually functioned as astronomical calendars. He believed that they reflected the orbits of the sun and the moon. And not only that, but the shape of the 7-circuit labyrinth actually mirrors the motion of the planet Mercury as it's seen from Earth. If the labyrinths were calendars, this wouldn't have just allowed their builders to keep track of the months and years as they went by. It would also allow them to time their rituals to specific astronomical alignments. It's just another good theory though, but like all the others, it's very, very criticized. And this is because the labyrinths lack consistent entrance directions, which would be crucial for accurate astronomical observations. You think they'd all be positioned the same way, but they're not. So honestly guys, I'm stumped. We have no idea what they are, what they're used for, who made them, why, and it's something we've all been trying to figure out for a long time. The earliest written records though do date to 1552, but serious research on the structures did not begin until the late 19th century, when Alexander Elisiv documented them in 1883. However, the next significant study came from an unlikely source. In 1925, a man named Nikolai Vinogradov found himself imprisoned in the Solovetsky camp. These peaceful islands were later converted into one of the most notorious prison camps of the Soviet system. While imprisoned there, he had the opportunity to study these labyrinths extensively, and in 1927, he published a detailed scientific description of them, and he concluded that they were all different shapes, orientations, which suggested they weren't built to a single pattern or for a single purpose. And it's amazing because his work was conducted under the harshest of circumstances, but it still provides the backbone for a lot of what we know about this place. And for me personally, I think one of the most interesting things about all of this is that these aren't massive monuments requiring thousands of workers and advanced engineering, like the pyramids of Egypt or the stone circles of Stonehenge. They were very, very simple structures that could have been built by a small handful of people. And yet they make us scratch our heads. So maybe in our search for answers, we're looking in the wrong place. Maybe instead of digging and analyzing, we should be experiencing them. Because the most impressive insights always come from the personal experiences of those who have walked along those same paths. Unfortunately, who built them, why they were built, all the questions we've all asked and thought about during this episode, we don't know. It remains a mystery. And because you guys made it this far, I want you to all comment below Labyrinth, so that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys love this kind of content where we deep dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, and we cover these true cases and bizarre true mysteries, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. And never forget, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.